Recording of the first. All right,
Ready to
good.
go. Thank you.
Well, as you know, it's the second lecture. The first part of the lecture, I must inform everybody, will be quite tough, but absolutely necessary. And I recorded only about a third of the events that took place in the exile. Do remember that we finished last lecture saying that everything was destroyed by the Romans, Jews were taken into exile, and we'll talk more about that. The destruction of the temple between 70 and 73 CE was the insular event in the history of Jews and Judaism. I say Judaism because the temple represented the spiritual unification of all Jewish people, wherever they were. So many ran north, as I mentioned, the proto-Christians. They went through Syria, through Middle East, what is today Iraq, and arrived in Persia. Persia was Iran to today. Others were taken, hundreds of thousands were taken as slaves by the Romans. People know about this. But there are in fact 4 cohorts of Jews. And there were many migrated by themselves to what is called Spain today, was called Iberic Peninsula during the Roman. Later on, in Hebrew, the land was called Sfarad, and from that comes the word of the Sephardic Jews. It means Sfarad in Hebrew, even today. Many also migrated northbound to France, early German principalities, but these were not very many at that time. They became a larger cohort later on that became the Ashkenazi Jews. This was the dispersion of the Jewish people. And I thought it may help you. It's not in the file that I sent you, but I added it today because here is a map, and this is the Judea, and this was called the northern part Samaria, which is now the West Bank. This is the Galilee, and they were around the lake of Tiberias into what is called now Syria. You see Damascus, and going north and northeast, they enter the land of Persia at that time, which was very strong empire and very aggressive also. Now we'll talk about the Jews in Iberia, which in fact is Spain and Portugal. Well, you'll see there were both 3 colors. The white is the most important event. The yellow is what I usually think I record. And there's something in blue. And look carefully at that, because these were things that were not tough on the Jews, were a little bit tolerant of the Jews. So in fact, after the fall of Rome, the city of Rome, in 476, Jews were tolerated in Gaul, which was today France, and Iberia, which is the Spain. They were tolerated. In fact, at that time, the Visigoths conquered the area of France and Spain and Portugal. And Alaric, king of Visigoths, he gave them, the Jews, judicial autonomy. He did not know exactly who they are. But later on, all privileges were revoked, and the suppression of Jewish religion started in Iberia. Jews were forced to convert or be expelled. Jewish children only as Christians. And finally, in the 8th century, the Moors conquered southern Iberia. That is the conquest of the Moors, or Arabs. They were not Arabs, they were the Moors. The golden age of Jewish culture started in the 8th to the 10th century, a period that modern scholars call an idealized interfaith utopia. Some people doubt that it was so good, but most people agree that Jews and Christians were protected by the non-Muslim called dhimmis. They were not Muslim, very important, but they were protected. And the Jews were much better treated, in fact, in Andalusia, Andalusia being Al-Andalus, the south of Spain, were better treated than in Central Europe. Remember, a branch went to France and Germany. There were many major influences of Arabic culture from the Babylon academies, which were famous at that time for all sciences available in the world. These two, Abd al-Rahman and his son, they were the caliphs of Cordoba, allowed an unparalleled economic and intellectual prosperity with Jewish integration in the Arab Islamic society. Physicians were and treasurers at the court, bankers, philosophers, poets, making advances in sciences, chemistry, astronomy, mathematics, and philology, particularly in mathematics. There were Jewish philosophers of great renown. Saadia Gaon. Gaon in Hebrew means wise man. Ibn Gabirol, poet, politicians, knew everything. Maimonides was probably the most known to the world today in the 12th century. We'll talk about him. But pogroms against Sephardic Jews started by a Muslim mob from nowhere and killed 4,000 Jews in one day, in 1011, in Cordoba. Hezekiah Gaon tortured and murdered, and that was the end of the great spirits, the Gaonim in Hebrew. Gaon makes the plural Gaonim after 400 years of the academy from Pumpadita, from Babylon. Then we have Granada massacred by Muslim, Jews in the Granada attacked by the invasion of the new Berbers, Almoravids, and in fact the end of golden age of Jewish culture in Spain after 2 centuries. In 1146, the Jews were expelled from Muslim Spain. And then another invasion of the Almohads, another group of Berbers, and then persecutions on the Jews to convert to Christianity or to Islam. A word about Moses ben Maimon, or Maimonides Rambam. Rambam is an abbreviation of Rabbi Maimonides Moses ben Maimon. He lived in the 12th century, born in Cordoba, Jewish philosopher, one of the most prolific and influential Torah scholars of the Middle Age, astronomers, physician to Saladin, the king and the emperor, wrote 14-volume Mishneh Torah, comments on the Torah, and codification of the Talmudic law, a superb jurisprudential work. 2 books are very well known, The Guide for the Perplexed and The Principles of Faith, in which I think he included his the way of doing the charity. He became a prominent philosopher and polymath in both the Jewish and Islamic worlds of Avicenna and Averroes. It's interesting that in Hebrew the word charity is called tzedakah. And most importantly is that tzedakah recognizes the root of the word justice, tzedek. Tzedek means justice in Hebrew, today. And tzedakah is charity. And he said that there were 8 ways of doing the charity, and I'll present to you only 6 of them. The most noble being giving anonymously to a known recipient without being asked. And goes down to what people do normally, usually, giving in sadness, he said, giving out of pity. And there were other translations saying giving unwillingly. I don't know. But people give usually willingly, but not inadequately. And the most beautiful way of doing it is to give anonymously to a known recipient that did not ask. He was so recognized in his world that, believe it or not, the United States House of Representatives has its effigy at one of the 23 reliefs of great historical lawgivers in the chamber of the United States House of Representatives in the Capitol. A great honor. Continuing the Jews in Spain and Portugal, the King Alphonse of Spain said, "The Jews are slaves of the king," quote unquote. Forced conversions, countless massacres in Spain, devastation of Sephardic communities, massacres of Marranos, the Jews who had forcefully adopted the Christian religion. Ferdinand and Isabel adopted the Inquisition in Spain and Portugal and their dominions, from Goa to Peru and Mexico. Thomas of Torquemada burned 6,000 volumes of Jewish manuscripts that are gone. Mexican Inquisition began in the 16th century. In 1492, the year that Columbus left to discover America, Ferdinand II and Isabella, under the insistence of the church, wrote the general edict of the expulsion of the Jews from Spain. That was the end of the famous Jewish community in Spain. Approximately 200,000 Jews were exiled and about 300,000 converted. They were the famous Marranos. They migrated mostly to France, which is today France, and then some, in fact, returned to Palestine. Not very much is known about that. So I thought of summarizing for you, what did the Jews create in Spain? Major progress in sciences, astronomy, mathematics, medicine, languages, philosophy, secular poetry, sophisticated treatises on morality and Talmud, particularly from Maimonides, this I mentioned. And also, it's good to know, Sephardic Jews created the Ladino, a jargon of Spanish and Hebrew, still spoken in 30 countries. It will be, if you want, linguistically the equivalent of Yiddish created by the Ashkenazi Jews in the rest of the Europe. A combination of Spanish and Hebrew. And that was, as you know, Yiddish is Hebrew and German. The Sultan Bayezid II, that was very famous in his time, said that how could Ferdinand and Isabel lose their Jews? And he stated that he gained them. He sent Admiral Kemal Reis, a very famous naval commander and cartographer, with a fleet of ships to take the Jews and bring them to his empire, and issued a royal order, Firman is called, to all his governors in the European provinces to receive and protect the Jews. And the Jews forcefully left from Spain to France, Italy, and Central Europe, Some of them made on the sea to the Balkan Peninsula and to the Ottoman Empire, at the invitation of the Sultan, and some made it to the Khazaria, Ukraine of today. We'll talk about this later. So let's talk about the Jews in Central Europe and in the Byzantine Empire. According to the early Christianity, and that will clarify the question that I don't know if I answered completely, there are two Johns. John, the first one, around 100 or 125 CE, wrote the Gospel, or put together the Gospel of John. The other John, very famous, is John Chrysostom. He was one of the first archbishops of Constantinople when under the Byzantine Empire adopted Christianity. He was very famous. He wrote books, and his word comes from the Greek Chrysostom, the golden mouth. Both of them said Jews were heretics. Heretics means that they have a religion, they are not naive, but they don't ignore the early Christianity. And we talk about this. Naturally, people were not very well read at that time. They took whatever they thought, they believed, anybody that told them something. So ignorance was dominant in the world in general. And so come the religious antisemitism was the first one to the forced conversions. But then were massacres, social antisemitism, that we'll talk about later on. The religious persecutions first, which was absolutely based on the fact that the Jews did not convert to Christianity. In the 6th century, the Byzantine Emperor Justinian the Great, a very great man, he wrote the Corpus Juris Civilis, in which he forbade the use of Hebrew language for prayer, which is ominous for the Jewish people. The last prayer that a Jew will make before he knows he dies is Shema Israel. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is one. This is a very famous prayer, very, very old. It was banned. About the same time, in Frankish Kingdom, Clermont, Jews had to accept Christianity or leave. Byzantine Empire, the next century, first case of sanctioned forced baptism. The Council of Clichy in Frank Kingdom, any Jew who accepts public office must convert. And even in the Muslim world, the Caliph Omar II banned Jewish worship on the Temple Mount. If you think that continues over centuries, even today, the recent events in East Jerusalem had to do with worshipping on the Mount. They don't allow Jews to worship on the Temple Mount, or Al-Aqsa, most cases. All the religious persecutions. Emperor Basil, all Byzantine Jews must be baptized by force. On the other hand, here it seems in blue some good news. You see the Sicut Judaeis, a constitution of the Jews that was the official position of papacy regarding the Jews and was in force till the 15th century. It was to protect the Jews from forced conversion and abuses. It does not mean that people followed this. People did what they wanted to do, or some clergy, local clergy, incited them to do. The Holy Roman Emperor Frederick Barbarossa, very famous, ordered priests not to preach against Jews. Was it done? Not necessarily. Saladin took Jerusalem from the Crusader and allowed Jews to live there. And then in the 13th century, the famous blood libel in Fulda, Germany. Emperor Frederick II officials could not confirm the assertion, but I'll tell you about blood libel. Papal repudiation could not convince the masses. One has to understand that what over centuries, over 20 centuries, what the Vatican said was not necessarily followed by the masses. What the bishop said could or could not be followed by the masses. What happened with the blood libel? A man stated, an ignorant, Jews require human blood for the baking of the matzahs. An absurdity. People, the masses attributed to Jews the death of children found dead. No sign that blood was taken, but Jews killed the children and used their blood, they said. It started, in fact, in England in 1144, 1168, then in Spain in 1250, then again in England 1255, and finally in the 15th century, Simon of Trent became very famous. Why he in particular, I do not know. And then it spread. 150 recorded cases of blood libel that incited killing of the Jews. This was a statue of Simon of Trent. Trent is a town in northern Italy, as you know. Was an Italian child whose disappearance and death was blamed on the leaders of the city Jewish community. Period. Pope Sixtus V confirmed the cult of Simon of Trent. It was made Saint Simon, was considered a martyr and patron of kidnapped and tortured victims for about 500 years. Until our times, in 1965, when remember Pope Paul VI declared the episode a fraud and decanonized Simon's sainthood. So justice does occur. The next terrible thing that happened to the Jews was the host desecration. Let's review this. A mass was celebrated in Bolsena in North Italy, and the red color appeared on the host without explanation. It was immediately ascribed to the Jews accused of trying to kill the host. How? Stabbing the host. Inconceivable, but that was what was done by what was said. Host desecration accusations in the 14th century. Violence spread to over 50 Jewish communities. The entire population of Brussels is massacred over allegations of host desecration in 14th century. And it was the end of the Hebrew community in Brussels. Let's explain. This is the picture of what is considered to be host desecration. A piece of white bread and a red stain. Now, this was called bloody bread, and this is known that is due to a bacterium called Serratia marcensis growing on bread. This bug is also pathogenic. It's difficult for man to have an infection on that, and it was shown. Okay, first of all, let me just review this. For the first accusation of host desecration, local Jews burned at the stake. Pope Innocent IV ordered Louis IX of France to burn all Talmud copies. These were the painting that was widely distributed at that time. You see priests, the Jews, stabbing the host. This is in a 6th century painting showing the alleged desecration of hosts by Jews. Now the truth. In 19th century, Bartolomeo Bizio, a pharmacist, discovered Serratia marcensis as the cause of an episode of blood red discoloring of polenta in the city of Padua. The bug colonizes on anything that has the carbohydrates of bread. The red pigmentation is caused by the expression of the dye prodigiosin. It's very well known today. Thousands of Jews were accused by host desecration and burned alive in Bavaria, as is shown in this woodcut of the 15th century. Going on. Religious persecutions. Pope Martin reminded Christians that Christianity derived from Judaism, but the bull was withdrawn the following year because they said it was attained by fraud. Casimir IV of Poland renews the rights of Jews. It was revoked a few years later at the insistence of the bishop. As I said, that was not necessarily following what the Pope says or what the bishop said. Jews were burned at stake in charges of false desecration. I showed you the woodcut. And the Spanish Inquisition is established in 1481. Now, the Inquisition was not necessarily after the Jews. In fact, it was combating heresy in general. They used torture and violence to get confessions. Local clergy was the judges, mostly of the Dominican order, and it has its own time. Other persecutions were religious. All Jews must convert to Islam, leave or be killed. And then the episode of Martin Luther, which I'm surprised, but he wrote 3 books: Servitus Judaeorum, on the Jews and their lies, and Admonition against the Jews. And I'm sorry to show you this book on the Jews on their lies, a 65,000-word anti-Judaic treatise in 1543. And this is some excerpts from the points about the Jews. This is Luther saying, set fire to their synagogues and schools, their houses also be razed and destroyed, prayer books and Talmudic writings to be taken from, rabbis be forbidden, self-conduct on the highways, etc., etc., etc. This is what was at that time. I'm sure that the Lutheran practice evolves better. I decided to review separately massacres that are done for whatever reason. In fact, the oldest one is before our era, in the 5th century BCE. Haman, Grand Vizier of Persia, attempts a genocide of Jews on false accusation. No questions. Mordecai, uncle of Esther, a Jewess, was wife of the king, tells her what happens. And Ahasuerus, the king, told Esther that the Jews, or Esther told Ahasuerus, were innocent and implored to intervene. So the king intervened, punished Haman, and Jews were saved. And this is the subset of the famous Purim holiday of the Jews, possibly the nicest holiday, the nicest Jewish feast in the practice of Judaism. But then things changed. In 30 BCE, a large Jewish community in Alexandria, remember the community who wrote the Septuagint, the first Greek translation of the Bible. Thousands of Jews were killed in that big community. Roman soldiers killed 50,000 Jews in Alexandria riot. 1 million Jews killed and hundreds of thousands taken or slaves when the temple was destroyed. Later on, Bar Kokhba, I mentioned him, had a revolt that was crushed. Reportedly 500,000 Jews were killed in Judea. Half of the Jewish population of Isfahan in Persia murdered. massacres of Jews in the Byzantine Empire, massacres of Jews in Medina in Saudi Arabia. A violent earthquake occurred in Greece in 1021. People ascribed this to desecration of Jesus by the Jews who were burned alive. Massacres of Jews in Fez, Morocco. I'm showing this to see that all over the known world at that time there were massacres of Jews. First Crusade. First Crusade in fact came with something new. Why fight Christ's enemies abroad when they are living among us? And killed thousands of Jews, particularly in the Balkan Peninsula. The Second Crusade, Jews in France suffered immensely. Third Crusade, in towns all over Europe. We come to the time of 1346 with a plague, the famous plague or Black Death, spreading all over Europe. And surprisingly, just around Kiev, Krakow, a large community of Jews, it did not spread. The Jews were accused of poisoning the wells, and therefore Jews massacres spread in France and Germany, as you see, between 1346 and 1353. European Jews were blamed for the plague. They say that they were poisoning the wells. Massacres occurred all over the place. Towns were emptied of Jews until it was not known at that time that the plague, Black Death or bubonic plague, was caused by what is called today Yersinia pestis, a microbe carried by a red fleece. Yersinia pestis was discovered in 1894 by Alexander Yersin, a Swiss-French doctor, incidentally of Russian origin. And that was the cause of the plague and not the Jews. But there was Strasbourg massacre and many others. In 1389, a Jewish boy was accused of plotting against a priest. No proof. A mob slaughtered approximately 3,000 of Prague Jewish community. Destroyed the synagogue and the Jewish cemetery. And the Wenceslas, the Holy Roman Emperor, found that the only thing he could say is the responsibility was with the Jews for going outside during the Holy Week. Incredible, but that is what he said. 15th century, massacres and forced conversion of Majorcan Jews in Spain, Morocco, Spain, Lisbon, massacre in 1506. If not, nobody knows what happened. He says that they were burned alive. And now today they built a sort of monument. This is a very recent picture. And this clearly stated in memory of the thousands of Jews who were victims of intolerance and religious fanaticism, killed on 19 April 1506 on this square. 17th century, massacre of 100,000 Jews and Polish nobles by Ukrainian Cossacks. Khmelnytsky was a known hating man of Jews. There were expulsions and forfeiture of property, besides killing. So the first ghetto occurred in Alexandria in Egypt. Then Emperor Tiberius expelled Jews from Rome. Emperor Claudius expelled Jews from Rome, although he was a very well educated man. And Caligula, the crazy Caligula, gave Jews citizenship in Rome. But then Emperor Hadrian ordered the expulsion of Jews from Judea because there were still Jews, about 2 or 3 million left in Judea. And that was the end of the Jewish historic homeland, their land, and the start of the Jewish exile. he also had the impunity to change the name of Jerusalem, call it Aelia Capitolina. That infuriated the Jewish community, but in fact, it meant the loss of Jewish nationhood. I mentioned the Caracalla, not Caligula, Caracalla, allowed Jews to become citizens of Rome. Emperor Julian the Apostate allows the Jews to return to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. So there were also some wise people who look at the data or the reality or the truth. The Byzantine Emperor Justinian the Great, the Corpus Juris Civilis, status of Jews was for hundreds of years based on this book. Emperor Justinian said also that Jews cannot testify against Christians. Why? No answer. In the 7th century, there was a Jewish revolt against Heraclius of Byzantium. The revolt was in Judea, so that was the last attempt to gain Jewish autonomy in the land of Israel. In the 900 Byzantine Jews flee to Caesarea. It's interesting to mention that when there was so much fanaticism and deep ignorance dominant in Western Europe, in the Khazar state, made from nomads in southern Russia or Ukraine, was famous for its justice and tolerance. And people persecuted for their faith, any faith, flocked into Caesarea from everywhere. Of interest, it was conquered by other invasions. What can I tell you? You can read this if you can. Jerusalem fell to Seljuk Turks in the 1071, and since then was under the Ottoman Empire. Ottoman started in the 13th century, in fact, but there were restrictions for the Jews. And the first expulsion of the Jews from France occurred in the 12th century. The First Crusade led to accusation of blood libel, and many communities were destroyed. Edicts of expulsion, immovable property such as houses, fields, vines, barns, and vines were confiscated, entered the royal domains of France. The same thing was done also in England. Jews, to be identified, had to have these conic, stupid-looking hats, Judenhut, and then Fourth Lateran Council required the Jews to wear specific clothing that I show, but no Christian shall do to Jews any personal injury. Later on, Jews banned from residing in Jerusalem, inconceivable. Louis XII expelled the Jews from France. Edward of England expelled all Jews from England. All their property became crown property. Philip IV again seized the Jewish property and expelled 100,000 Jews. 15th century Jews expelled from practically every place. But Lithuanian princes were more favorable to Jews. They invited Jews back for economy reasons. 16th century first ghetto established in Venice, the first ghetto established in ghetto. There was one in Alexandria, but not like the one in Venice. Jews were supposed to carry garlic and the money bag, anti-Semitic stereotypes, in the 6th century. 17th century, 18th century. 18th centuries brought another thing. With the division of Poland, Catherine I of Russia acquired about 5 million Jews, which she did not want. And then she made a pale of settlement, an area of modern Belarus, Lithuania, Moldova, in part of Poland and Ukraine called Pale of Settlement, where Jews were supposed to live. It's not a ghetto, if you want, it's a territorial ghetto, but they were not allowed to live any place else in Russia. And Elizabeth of Russia ordered the expulsions of Jews. There were other persecutions. I'll try to skip a little bit. If you have received the lecture that I sent to you, that I think that the office of the Alpert Jewish Community Center sent to you, you have all the details of this. If you want more, if you want this sent to you in other colors, I can do that. Anyhow, the Western kings in France and England got the idea that the easy thing is to expel the Jews and assume their property that went into the royal possessions. But in Poland, Polish Prince Boleslav the Pious had a statute that gave personal freedom and legal autonomy tribunal to the Jews. A Charter of Jewish Liberties in Poland was ratified. And the massive migration of Jews from Western Europe to Poland, 7% of the population. And that's the reason that when Poland was partitioned and Russia took a big portion of it, they also knowingly assumed also about 5 million Jews that became not citizens, of course, but living on the so-called Russian territory. There are other persecutions. The most were during the Inquisition in Europe. If you see, the more than 35,000 witches and wizards were killed in Germany. Jews were banned, were attacked, books were killed, were destroyed. One thing that impressed me is that a 17th century German drawing showing a Jew taking the oath. He is partly undressed, which is unacceptable for a Jew taking the oath. He stands on a dead saw, and you know that in Judaism the pigs are not tolerated, and he's taking allegedly the oath that way, which is, I found it horrible, but it was done. We come to the 18th century. Maria Theresa, Duchess of Austria, orders the Jews out of Bohemia, but reversed the order a few years later, or 1 year later, on conditional payment every 10 years, which is called Queen's money. Emperor Joseph II of Austria, the emperor, you remember, Mozart, very cultured emperor, did not know anything about Judaism. He abolished most of the persecution, called it tolerance patent, and he said Judaism is in quintessence of foolishness and nonsense, and Yiddish and Hebrew were eliminated from public records, believe it or not. And Moses Mendelssohn, that I'll talk about, a great wizard, a great man, says such a tolerance is more dangerous play intolerance than open persecution. We'll have 10 minutes intermission.
Thank you. That's been fascinating so far.
I mentioned that it's a tough part, but I had to present you data reduced probably to a third of what is published.
Unfortunately true.
It's true, these data are published, and I skimmed through that and took all that was more painful. Painful not for necessarily for the Jews, that is past for the Jews. It's painful humanity, for
Correct.
humanity. That
That's a great
humanity,
perspective.
sorry, go
I was
ahead.
saying that's a great perspective. It is anti-Semitism is not just a curse for Jews; it's a curse for all of the world.
Absolutely. And to see anti-Semitism today, personally, I take it as offensive to human mind.
Hmm.
This morning, my wife showed me on Facebook, look at your Facebook, there is a picture of a sign in front of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. It's a big cardboard. It's written Holocaust and an arrow down and written big lie.
Terrible.
Today, this morning, in Washington, D.C.,
Hmm.
is it conceivable in our country? A big lie.
Yes, unfortunately.
So, all these killings, how many were killed? Several million, for sure. If there will be no many comments, I will ask for the favor of shortening the intermission and allowing me to resume. Would that
Please
be
do if
okay?
you're comfortable.
Pardon?
Please do when you're comfortable.
All right, let's continue. Jews in Central and Eastern Europe. Well, in Lithuania, since the 14th century, Lithuanian Jews formed a class of free men subject in all criminal causes directly to the jurisdiction of the Grand Duke and his official representative. Perfectly logical. But a few years later, Alexander Jagiellon decreed all Jews living in Lithuania proper and the adjacent territories were summarily ordered to leave. Just like that. Lithuania was a big land at that time and was together with Poland for centuries. And then the return of the exiled Jews. Why? I wrote to you in another slide for economic reasons, possibly. But Jews in Eastern Europe, I like to review for you the social and religious life. Socially completely isolated, without political governance or representation, ignorant of the surrounding world, restricted to a communal life in small villages, shtetls. You probably know the term. Shtetls comes from the German Stadt, means town, city. Diminutive, small one, it became in Yiddish shtetls, under the leadership of a rabbi who also served as judge, and a man who knew everything, devout of the religion which supported them spiritually, respect to the Shabbat, kashrut, the diet, you know, the rules for diet, the holidays, the Jewish customs, guardians of the Jewish oral tradition, developed the Ashkenazi rite, one of the two main rites in Judaism. Teaching and learning Torah. Elijah ben Solomon, the Vilna Gaon. That Gaon was a supreme mind, was a man who, a great spirit, not only with knowledge, but also judgment. He lived in Lithuanian greater city, Vilnius. His style of Torah and Talmud study shaped the analytical Lithuanian style of the teaching. And the yeshiva movement that you probably heard, the yeshiva movement to study the Torah, is a typical Lithuanian development, initiated by the Vilna Gaon main disciple, Rabbi Chaim Volozhin. They were, the Gaonim from father to son, there were a hierarchy, there was a family of Gaonim. The Jews in Eastern Europe developed Yiddish, the language of the Galut, a dialect of Hebrew mixed with German, but not necessarily only German, may be mixed also with other languages of Central Europe, but Hebrew is always in the Yiddish. So much so that the Yiddish spoken in Poland may be different than the Yiddish spoken in Germany or in Hungary. Hebrew was used only for prayers. Remember, Hebrew was the holy language. These Jews wrote Yiddish poetry, songs, theater, philosophy, books. Their dressing was that dictated by the rulers and was humble. They were not vain. Vanity was condemned. Jews were forbidden to own lands, forests, real estate, or any natural resources. They were confined to small home-based industries and manual handiwork, where watchmakers, very good watchmakers, jewelers, tailors, tanners, bakers, and then they accepted trades not wanted by Christians, usurers, money lenders, for which they were accused, but they were asked to do it. So it comes to, for me, I wrote it in larger letter, Jews were instrumental to a poor economy and were hated for that. That's it. Now let's talk about the occupation and religion. Many played instrumental music, klezmer, and were very good violinists. You know about that. They developed writing skills. They were teachers. Did not practice plastic arts, painting or sculpture. Remember, it is forbidden by the Jewish law. I don't want to go in details. I think that you know that, but that's the reason that Jews started paint and sculpture very late in the 19th century. They excelled in intellectual and spiritual pursuits. They studied Torah and Talmud and wrote extensively on religious topics. They had these religious schools, yeshiva. Yeshiva comes from the Hebrew word to sit down, yeshiv. Anyhow, they were schools even today. They study the books. They also learn medicine and practice it with talent. And they learn medicine because another precept in Judaism that is called Tikkun Olam. I'll talk about that. How about the church, the Jews and the non-Jews versus the Jews? Christianity and Islamic religions were anti-Jewish because of Jewish resistance to convert. Period. If the Jews could have converted, there would not be antisemitism. The church initiated and promoted antisemitism according to everybody that has the knowledge, the lack of bias, the objectivity. And anti-Judaism took many forms and cruelty. Why? Intolerance, of course. Popes, priests, mullah were passionately active in applying acts of persecution. Why? Intolerance, of course. And gaining the masses' respect and following. Masses wanted blood. Even today, masses want blood. We are reviewing some events right now. Masses did not change. Masses don't go for a good deed because we have been nice to each other, because we practice charity. No masses will go in the street, but they will go for blood. The leaders, the kings and princes, promoted anti-Semitism to gain favor with the church, control the masses again, and financial gain also. All libels against Jews, blood libel, hostage secretion, were fabricated by simple people to get a reward. They were all discovered as false, all of them. Libels were instigated and promoted by prelates. Many writings in favor of this short statement. I regret to have to write it. What about Jewish-Christian relations? Fraught with tensions about two major issues. Capital, the death of Jesus. Have the Jews committed deicide? Did Jews kill a Jew? Unacceptable. And the Jewish obstinacy to refuse accepting Christianity. We reviewed that very well, I think, last week. But if we didn't, please let me know. There were also many Christians who understood things as I present to you. They protected Jews from violent attacks. Even during the Crusades, Archbishop of Mainz, Bishop of Tyre, offered Jews a safe side against townspeople, masses, the mob. In Cologne, Köln, local Gentiles protected the Jews. Christian violence against Jews was rife, but there have been Christians who protected and helped the Jews. Do remember, and I'll mention this later, during the Holocaust, there were Christian priests that protected Jewish children and adults. Interfaith marriages occurred throughout times because love doesn't recognize necessarily religion. Jews in modern times and the Jewish Emancipation. The background. The Renaissance, you know, was the rebirth of culture, art, and learning that took place in the 14th and 16th centuries, starting in Italy and spreading to various other parts of Western Europe and to the world. The Renaissance is credited with bridging the gap between the Middle Ages and modern day civilization. If you allow me, the Renaissance is the backbone of our modern culture or way of life. I'm not talking about technology, I'm talking spiritually. The Renaissance promoted and was followed by the Age of Enlightenment. The Age of Enlightenment definition is an intellectual and philosophical movement that dominated the world of ideas in Europe during the 17th and 18th centuries. Very interesting. The central ideas of the Age of Enlightenment were use of reason, scientific method, progress. Advanced ideals such as liberty, progress, toleration, fraternity, constitutional government, and separation of church and state are the characteristic of the Age of Enlightenment. Enlightenment thinkers believed they could help create better societies and better people. For the Jews, it started to the law concerning the Jews, Loi relative aux Juifs, in 1791 decree, 2 years after the French Revolution, which said that they are citizens and they have the same rights like anybody else. Phenomenal, revolutionary. They were given equal rights, and that allowed the gradual integration of Jews into the Gentile society citizenship. Parallel to that and related to this was the emancipation in the Hebrew culture. It's called Haskalah. The word Haskalah means, in Hebrew, means culture, erudition, education. It's a major contributions of the Jews in science and journalism. That was the product of the Haskalah. And the Jews became actively, culturally and politically. What happened? Well, sadly, new types of antisemitism ensued. Economic and cultural antisemitism. I consider this very painful for humanity. It's such a beauty of thought, of evolution in mankind, cheap byproduct is the new types of anti-Semitism. Let me tell you a few words about Haskalah. It's called, in fact, the Jewish Enlightenment. Among the Jews in Central and Eastern Europe was revolutionary. It was a movement with certain influences on those in Western Europe and the Muslim world. It arouses a defined ideological worldview during the 1770s, and its last stage ended around 1881 with the rise of Jewish nationalism. We'll talk a little bit about that. Promoted, like the Emancipation in general, rationalism, liberalism, freedom of thought and inquiry, and is perceived as the Jewish variant of the Age of Enlightenment. I already told you that. I wrote this here because I was so enthused about the meaning of Haskalah. It pursued two complementary aims: to optimal integration of the Jews in the surrounding societies without changing religion, that is totally irrelevant, and the adoption of modern values, culture, and appearance, all combined with economic productivity. It also wanted to revive the Hebrew language for secular purposes and pioneered in modern press and literature in the language, being citizens of the world, if you want. And prominent among them in this current was Moses Mendelssohn. I don't know how much is known, but he lived in the 18th century. He started as a small, poor, hatchback young man who knocked at the gates of Berlin, asking for admission. He spoke only Yiddish. He was allowed because somebody from inside said that he needs Moses Mendelssohn as a teacher for his children. Immensely talented and hardworking, learned German, learned French, learned Latin. He corrected the German language in use and cast the classic German of today, was recognized in his time by the literati of the time as the man who established the classic German of today. This is a portrait was a painting of this poor Jew. Linguist, philosopher, theologian, taste, wrote the Code of Legal and Moral Law of Judaism. Work on Jewish Enlightenment, the Haskalah that I'm trying to explain. Was recognized for his philological and philosophic contributions, immense. His son, Abraham, was not religious. He established the banking business. And you know about his grandson, Felix Mendelssohn, the genial composer of fame. Now, emancipation of the Jews, it started in the Napoleonic era with the Loi des Juifs. Jews received citizenship, but not allowed to settle in many provinces. Then comes the Jewish Enlightenment like a secular, like an additional force with secular education, some assimilation and reform movement. Between 1848, the year of revolutions, of popular revolutions in Europe, and 1871, they acquired some equality. There were mixed marriages. Jewish women were the catalyst of linking the Judaism with the German culture. And then things evolve, as I said in the first lecture. There is cause and effect all our life. Anti-Jewish, anti-Semitism, so-called, created the Zionism because, you'll see this in a moment. Withdrawn, the Jews in the modern time, results of centuries of persecution. I thought of showing you a little bit who were the Jews at that time in the 18th, 19th century. Definitely withdrawn, circumspect about non-Jews, fearful of them. Remember, we were centuries after massacres. after emancipation, a display of self-deprecation, very special, sad humor, the famous Jewish humor, and the special wit. You recognize it. It has some doubts, gradual development of the art of comedy and self-critique. World recognized. Non-believer of the world knew open to them. And some adapted well, and some did not, and remained in their status for another century. The Jewish emancipation in Europe, in fact, was promoted by a non-Jew. In 1781, the Prussian historian, philolog, and man of letters, Christian Wilhelm Dohm, published über die bürgerliche Emanzipation der Juden, describing the anti-Semitic position in the governments and pleaded for equal rights of Jews. But the Congress of Vienna took into consideration he was very important at his time. Congress of Vienna had some difficulties with this concept. It was too much. Jewish organizations were formed, cause, effect, cause, effect. If there are difficulties in accepting the Jews, then the Jews now learn to make their own organization to promote themselves and the rights of the Jews. The Board of Deputies of British Jews, the Central Consistory in Paris, and so came out the Alliance Israélite Universelle, working for the emancipation and moral progress of the Jews, even today. And there was help, in fact, by a very important spiritual value that is very important to me, because probably it made me choose the profession of medicine. Tikkun Olam, improving the world. It's a secular principle in Judaism. The idea that Jews bear responsibility not only for their own moral, spiritual, and material welfare, but also for the welfare of the society at large. That's it. So you understand then that the Jews were very waiting for something to give them the impetus to become citizens of the world. Tikkun Olam ordered the aspiration in each one of us to behave and act constructively and beneficially. A Jewish principle that made the Jews striving to contribute to a better world. If you allow me to say, perhaps that's the reason there are so many very good Jewish doctors. Perhaps Jews became active culturally and politically. There were new types of antisemitism. Antisemitism appears not to be at all a religious problem. It's a human problem. Not accepting, not tolerating other people. So now we have economic and cultural antisemitism. A very well-known French Alphonse Toussaint said French finance was controlled by the Rothschild family and the British. Nonsense. Nonsense. They made their banks themselves, not only Rothschild. Emancipated Jews made major contributions in sciences and journalism that caused problems with the practice of the Jewish religion because of the demands of modern life and the non-Jewish society. Of course, it also caused more mixed marriages. People started to know each other. These communities that were isolated for centuries, now they started to say hello. And they had the same ideals. A common phenomenon in the 19th and 21st centuries is the changing patterns and coexistence of the types of antisemitism. Racial and economic, social and economic, cultural, social, economic, and political, all of them exist. And you'll see that from where? From France. There was an anti-Semitic newspaper, La Libre Parole, the free word, in end of 19th century. And then comes the Dreyfus affair. I don't know how much is known here, but it was one of the most notable examples of complex miscarriage of justice and anti-Semitism. Alfred Dreyfus was a 35-year-old Alsatian French artillery officer of the Jewish descent. He worked in the headquarters of the French army. In 1895, was falsely accused of communicating French military secrets to the German embassy in Paris. Sentenced to life imprisonment and jailed for 5 years in the Devil's Island in French Guiana. 1 year later, evidence came to light which identified the real culprit as a French army major named Ferdinand Esterhazy, who he was the traitor. High-ranking military officials suppressed the new evidence so that it doesn't appear that the French committed an injustice. This is the injustice. Military degradation of Alfred Dreyfus, Paris, 1895, with his sword being broken. And things did not say that. He was sent to Guyana, but the known writer Emile Zola wrote the open letter J'accuse, which stoked a growing movement of support for Dreyfus, putting pressures on the government to reopen the case. Dreyfus was returned to France for another trial after 4 years in Guyana. Dreyfus was exonerated and reinstated as a major in the French army only in 1906, 11 years after it started the process. He served during the World War I, ending his service with the rank of lieutenant colonel. He died in 1935. The affair from 1894 to 1906 divided France into two parts, pro and anti-Dreyfus, Dreyfusist and anti-Dreyfusist. It embittered French politics and encouraged radicalization. This is the page of L'Aurore. L'Aurore was the journal of Clemenceau. He was a politician, a doctor and a politician. And he invited Emile Zola to write this letter to the president. Letter to the President of the Republic. Famous. And that, again, cause and effect, which is so always in my lectures, because it's true. Look what happened. Theodor Herzl was a Jew of a Hungarian well-to-do family established in Vienna, a little bit assimilated. He was sent by a paper for which he was writing, a German paper, an Austrian paper, to France to follow the Dreyfus affair. And he wrote, he was shocked by what happened. He said, in France, bastion of emancipation, progress and universal socialism, can caught up in anti-Semitism and let the Parisian crowd, the mob, chant, kill the Jews. Where can they be safe once again, if not in their own country? Assimilation does not solve the problem, etc., etc. 2 years later, he created the Zionist Congress, and he started the political Zionists that helped creating the State of Israel. Cause and effect. Rothschild was always in France, the anathema was the problem, because they thought that Rothschild and the Jews want the world in their hands, etc., etc. Terrible things. And dawned on me to write down here something that was on my mind for ages. A friend asked me last week, Dr. Kane asked me, when comes this idea? I think since I was a child, since I felt what anti-Semitism means. I realized the press was always full of the Jewish question, of the Jewish problem. What is the problem? They always use a debate on the civil, legal, national, and political status of the Jews, the Jewish problem. A benign term for a negative attitude toward Jews. I believe that Jews' singular characteristic has been their religion, the source of all the religions in Europe. What is the problem? Anti-Semitic movements always use the quote-unquote Jewish question in their activities against the Jews. What is the problem? Let's see. Jews in Poland. This was Lithuania, and this was Poland. There was a big state, Lithuania, and they had wars, etc., with Peter the Great of Russia. This is a whole story here. And the Jews were here in the center of Europe because some princes invited them to come, and they were persecuted, so they migrated after they left Spain and France. They migrated to Belgium, and there were no Belgium and Holland, but they were under Spain at the time, and then all the principalities, the German principalities, and they were persecuted here with the ritual killing, etc., etc. And they migrated in the things that you see them in blue. This is the Austrian and Hungary Empire, and here were some German principalities, and all this was Lithuania and Poland together. And they were dressed in Poland like other people, more or less. And look at the transformation of the Emancipation. These were not traditional, these were Jews, merchant Jews in 19th century Warsaw. You see, they were dressed again like they were for centuries. They did not evolve. But they also found in 1917 the Bundist demonstration. These were political Jews. They started to have ideas of they are a force, a political force, and have the most emancipated person, Ludwig Leiser Zamenhof, ophthalmologist and linguist, who created the international language of Esperanto. This shows you three aspects of the Jews. All of that coexisted in the 18th, 19th century. Let's see the Jews in Russia. There was anti-Semitism in the Russian Empire, the Tsarist Russia, and there was continued anti-Semitism in the Soviet Russia. In the Russian Empire, definitely the instigator was always the Russian Orthodox Church, was terribly anti-Semitic. Russia was not affected by the changes in the Emancipation, and the Orthodox Church condemned the Jews right and left. As I mentioned already, the partition of the Poland in the 18th century brought 5 million Jews to Catherine of Russia, and she started the Pale of Settlement and forced the Jews to live in their shtetls and not outside of them. They were punished if they were outside. And this is where they lived. A large area. Pogroms. They have massive pogroms in the May laws, allegedly called temporary regulations regarding the Jews, that were particularly for the Jews, on the Jews that flee the Pale of Settlement. There was misery there. The Russian Orthodox Church stimulated anti-Semitism at all moments. But that created one thing. Almost 2 million headed to the United States. That was the big migration in the early end of 19th and early 20th century. 140,000 went to England. Another calamity. In 1903, a book is published in France, in Paris, in fact, Elders of Zion, a fabrication of anti-Semitic texts purporting to describe the Jewish plan for global domination. Nonsense. Widely distributed. read by every Russian, translated in 30 languages. Thousands and thousands were killed. Most famous Bialystok pogrom, this drunken man pulling a child. Horrible. But let's see what the truth is. The truth is the Jews' role in the empire's economic life. I thought it might be interesting. Jan Gottlieb Bloch was a railroad magnate that converted to Calvinism. He made a fortune. He established a scientific team to study the role of the Jews in the economy of the empire. A 5-volume work entitled Comparison of the Material and Moral Levels in the Western Great Russian and Polish region. A very benign title. He showed that in fact the Jews of the Pale Settlement, there's a comprehensive account on Jews and economic life in crafts, trade and industry. And the Jews were a boon for the Russian economy. They were creative. They gave a lot of stuff to be sold. 5-volume report was ignored and destroyed by the government. They were uncomfortable. World War I, 400,000 Jews mobilized and 80,000 served in the front line. After Russian retreat, of course, Jews were accused of treason. In March 17 revolution, Jews supported the revolution. Of course. Russian Orthodox Church, on the other hand, censuring their current anti-Semitic attitude, no move to protect them. In 1903, the Kishinev pogrom, one of the largest by Orthodox priests. So based on the Jewish life and the Jewish ideas, they were ready to accept the Social Democrats or Socialists with Martov and Trotsky, the Social Revolutionary Party, to be the Bundists for the Jewish life in Russia, and even the Zionists to return to Palestine, to speak Hebrew, of course, outlawed. They were the founders of the labor Zionism in Israel, the party of Mapai, you may know. They were Bundists and Zionists in the 1990. And then we had the revolution, October 17, and the Jews were very happy to leave the Pale Settlement. But 250,000 were killed in the White Army for being revolutionaries or counter-revolutionaries, capitalists, socialists. And Lenin was famous for saying the religion is the opium of masses, and Jews thought, rightfully, that anti-Semitism will be forgotten. Well, Lenin also said that anti-Semitism diverts the hatred of the workers and peasants from the exploiters toward the Jews. Well, in the socialist revolution, the Jews' social morals favored social justice. It is a commandment in the Jewish religion. Of course, they took the political movements to find social justice. And of course, there were some Jewish revolutionaries like Maxim Litvinov, Leo Trotsky, Zinoviev. But the socialist people did not see the Jews as true revolutionaries. Their sincerity was doubted, although they gave true leaders to the Red Revolution. Trotsky organized the Red Army, not Lenin. And there were only 6 or 8% in Russian communism. But of course, Trotsky was viewed as a symbol of Jewish Bolshevism, although the Soviets kicked him out, as you probably know, and killed him at the very end. In the Soviet Union, they were always seen that Zionists, ruthless cosmopolitans, these were the Jews, all kinds of terms to cover the Jews. Jewish scholars were removed, the Jewish cultural particularism of Stalin. Check out the Secret Service, look for the counter-revolutionaries, send them to the Gulag. Judaism was definitely suppressed, Hebrew was banned. Stalin eliminated the Jews from senior party, diplomatic, security, military positions. Jews in Ukraine, the same, Pale of Settlement. They were notorious anti-Semites. This is a Haidamag hang a Jew on his heels and plays the balalaika. This is an illustration that was very much beloved in the 19th century. Pogrom in Ekaterinoslav, Ukraine, 1905, thousands killed. In Kiev in 1915, announcement, Christian, take care of your children, it will be Jewish Passover. Blood libel, again. Jews in Germany. Well, perhaps you don't know that Richard Wagner, beloved Richard Wagner, wrote Das Judentum in their music, one of the first anti-Semitic books, 1869. Judaism in music was an essay. In fact, he wanted to take on the Giacomo Meyerbeer and Felix Mendelssohn in particular. But it was published under a pseudonym and then reissued under Wagner's name in 1869. It's an important landmark in the history of German anti-Semitism. In fact, a few years before the book that I mentioned in the first lecture, The Way of Victory of Germanicism over Judaism, that introduced the term anti-Semitism. Wagner had precedence. In the 19th and 20th century, there were about 500,000 Jews living in Germany. Probably 1910 there were 600,000 because many came from Russia, about 80,000. Many converted to Christianity, sure. In World War I, 72,000 Jews volunteered to serve, 12,000 died. They were loyal German citizens and they cried the Treaty of Versailles. Yet, remember, they have to face what the Hitler party started, with the idea of stabbing in the back myth. They were the socialists and the Jews, according to them. But the Jews also did very well in the financial and cultural life. Do realize that 5 of 12 Nobel Prizes were Jewish scientists. But in 1933, when Nazis started, were about 500,000 Jews by definition. Here is the poster in 1919. Unpatriotic populists were socialists, Bolsheviks, and of course the Jews in the Weimar Republic. Well, the Jews responded with this poster showing the 12,000 fell in camp in the fight for the Deutsche Mütter. And they were buried in the northern France, and these were stones of some Jew, and they was removed by the Nazi in World War II. Of course. That's my end for today. And I'm sorry, I'm only 5 minutes over.
No, nothing to be sorry about. That was both haunting and informative and incredible. And I hope everybody will take a chance to join us again in a week on the 23rd for part 3. Feel free to unmute yourselves.
Pardon?